Welcome to the No Bull Political Arena. With your hosts, Sophia Nelson, Bill O'Reilly, Brian Mistro, and TJ McCormick. It's real voices, raw politics, and no bullshit. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another No Bull Political Arena. I'm here today with Bill O'Reilly. Of course, this is Brian Mistro, and we've got a special guest today, Joe Carvin, and I cannot wait to introduce you and have Bill talk to him about what we've been discussing this entire last week and a half, which is the reserve currency. Before we do, I want to chat just a couple of minutes about some things. First of all, we had someone that's been watching our show, and they asked us a question, and we said in this last show, pitch the questions, and we're going to come out and we'll put them on the show and we'll answer them. So the question was, with the projected changes to the EC map, the Electoral College map, based on the 2030 census projections, how might that impact a Democrat POTUS? I will start, and then I'm going to hand it over to you, Bill, and get your thoughts as well. It could be substantial. If you look at the map, and we've got the map right back up here, so you can take a peek at that. I'm not as worried about the stuff coming out of California. That's not going to make California red, okay? However, the stuff coming out of Wisconsin and the Rust Belt up there, which are typically purple states, that's going to be an issue. It may not make them the purple states as big of an issue moving forward because they could lose. The Electoral College may not have to go through there in order for a president to win. Now, there's a caveat to this, and we actually mentioned this on our show the other day, and that is, where are the folks going that are leaving California and New York and some of these other states? They're going to North Carolina.
Tax-free states.
They're going to Florida. They're going to Georgia. They're going to Texas. So I have long said that I think Texas is going to be purple. It may be more of a Georgia or Arizona type of purple, okay? And I do think Georgia's going to trend more purple. But this could affect Texas races, and it could definitely affect Florida races. In my opinion, Florida is really if not a lean red, somewhere close to a solid red. And so it'll be interesting to see how it affects the other two big states, because if people leave from a blue state and move to a red state, that doesn't make the state redder. It makes it a little bit more blue. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. Similar thinking, though. Nothing will happen until 2032. The reapportionment won't be prepared for that until that election. So they've got a little bit of time on that. But I would say the demographics are not leaning in the Democrats' favor at all. We talked about it a little bit last night. Population trends, birth trends, the rest of the stuff affects that. But if you look, one way I disagree a little bit, but I'm not sure, Brian, whether you meant it this way. When you had New Yorkers move down and New Jersey voters and others down to Florida, that actually made Florida a solid red state because of where they were coming from in the state. They were coming from upstate Western New York, more rural regions of New Jersey, where they were conservative. The city people aren't moving down. It's the exurbans, suburbans, and country folks. So 2032 is when that will kick in. It's a great question. Thanks for posing it. And but demographically, the country should get more conservative over the next 10 years.
Yeah. It's not good for Democrats. It kind of sum it up. Just a couple of news items I want to chat on because it's very big news. The FBI has raided Fulton County election offices in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm very worried about that. I've kind of tried to play it off a little bit on some of social media and joke around a little bit about it. But are we going to go back and relitigate the 2020 election? Really? This does nothing to help everybody feel better about the feel. And it didn't work last time. You lost every single court case. Are we going to do it now? The bigger concern that I had was that Tulsi Gabbard showed up. I have no idea what that woman is doing there and why she would be a part of this. That becomes even more concerning from my perspective, okay? folks, there was no fraud sizable enough in that election to change any election outcome, and it was Republicans running the state and Brad Raffensperger running Secretary of State. And I've had the opportunity to meet Brad Raffensperger and spend some time with him. And I'm going to tell you right now, he's a class act. He is as Republican as it gets. There's no way that he was involved in anything illicit. Okay. I'd like to get your take on it too, real quickly, Bill, because that was some pretty big news.
Yeah, I'm going to say I'm on the board of an institute at a university, and we actually hired Raffensperger's press communications director afterwards because we knew he had been through the laundry. That was the hottest
Yeah.
spot. He was getting attacked by by the administration, by the White House, and he really hung in there. It's rare he didn't get bowled over, and you got to respect that, certainly. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see what's going on.
Bill and Brian, I actually have an interesting view on this,
Yeah,
only because my brother was the lawyer hired by the Republicans to contest any election challenge fraud
remember.
in that election. And I called him up 2 weeks after and I said, "Hey, Michael, what's all this on Fox News?" And he said, "No, I just got off the phone with three very well-known politicians." And I told him all the same thing. He says, "Not only do you have to pull an inside straight, you have to pull an inside straight 5 times."
Yeah.
He says, "All I need is evidence. I'm not going to put my reputation online." So my brother never did get involved because he knew from the get-go that, of course, there's always going to be irregularities.
Yeah.
But as you said, Bill, there was never an irregularity that got to the point where it would change the election results.
Yeah,
That's right.
I think what a lot of Republicans argue, and they didn't make this case well, I don't think. They argued that the changes that were made state by state because of COVID that allowed absentee ballot, liberalization of absentee ballots, that type of stuff, it did increase the possibility for fraud, but there's no evidence of it. And the time to challenge that was before the election.
And they lost every election suit that they challenged it to before the election.
Yes,
Which,
yes. I
again,
hope they don't go back there. I really
well,
do.
again, and Bill Barr really tried to get it changed beforehand. And as we all know, Jimmy Carter was all over the potential for election fraud with mail-in ballots. And when I ran for my political career, just as in terms of background, I ran for U.S. Senate for 2 weeks, as Bill knows. I ran for U.S. Congress and lost. Then I came to my local school board election and lost that election. Now that was 100% mail-in ballot, and you had to sign on the back of the tab. And I had a strong outreach to first-time voters, and ultimately, 20% of the votes were thrown out because they forgot to sign the ballot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
They allow you to
fraud. That was just bad luck.
they allow you to correct that in Washington. I don't know if they
Oh,
do
really?
in your
No,
state.
there's no correction.
Not New York, not New York.
They don't do that in New York.
For Blaine, yeah.
Yeah, so I want to move on to Joe. I just want to make one other little last post of news that I thought might be interesting to our viewers. So the Crystal Ball Senate ratings are out, and we'll put this map up as well. It effectively shows Michigan, Maine, and North Carolina as toss-up states. Texas and Florida, very likely red. Colorado, New Mexico, Illinois, Virginia, and so forth. Those are all safely blue. I agree with that. And then Minnesota is pretty safely blue.
I'd say so.
Yeah. So
I think it's red.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. So I disagreed with this. So a couple of my disagreements. I think North Carolina is over. I think that the polling there is just atrocious. If you're a Republican trying to run up against the previous governor there, he's won statewide races twice, I believe, not just as governor. I think he was Secretary of State as well. I think Maine is going to be more difficult for Democrats than what they think it is. I think Michigan, they've got some really good candidates going there. It's McMorrow and a couple of others. And we've also can show you the polling that's got McMorrow up and beating in a primary everybody else. We'll put that up here too, so you can take a look at it. Bottom line is we're still a long ways from the midterms.
Yeah, it's early.
It is early, and a lot of things can happen. But I disagree with some of the takes on this. Let me ask you real quickly, Bill. Your opinion on Maine, North Carolina, and Michigan. Are those toss-ups?
Too early. Too early. I hesitate to make any predictions this far out. Anything could happen. The market could explode. It's going to break 50,000. It's going to be you've got maybe a Ukraine deal. Like a lot of things could happen. So I think it's early on. But I would gut wise, I would say North Carolina might break red, blue at some point, demographically. And Maine, we'll see if Collins can come back. She's been there a long time,
Yeah, she's an
and
incumbent.
see if she can gin
Yeah,
things up. But we have to keep an eye on those states and watch them over time because it's really. But sometimes you get a candidate that's just going to run away with it,
yeah,
and the other side doesn't run anyone very good. So that doesn't seem to be the case in these races. We'll see.
yeah. We'll see. Okay, I'm going to hand everything over to Bill. Bill is known Joe
Oh, uh-oh.
Carvin for for a long time. I am super, super, super excited about having you on, Joe.
Thank you.
And I'd love for Bill to do some of the introductions because you guys have known each other for so long. And we're going to push this off, as we've been telling our audience for now a week and a half. We want to talk about the reserve currency, what it is, how it could affect you, and so forth. So with that being the case, I'm going to hand it over to Bill. And please, Bill, take over and tell the audience what a wonderful guest we've got here.
Yeah, we are very lucky to have Joe today. Joe Carvin is one of my favorite people in the world and one of the most interesting people in the world, and you will find out why shortly. It's such an honor. Joe's going to be doing a show on this network, which we're going to talk about, and it's going to be. Can we say the name? Is that okay, Brian?
Yes, absolutely.
It's called The Hinge of History, and Joe can talk about it more. Joe, welcome to No Bull. We're so honored to have you joining the network, and we're so happy to have you here today. You know so much about the Wall Street world, finance, like you've come out of that world and spent decades there. So we can't think of anyone better to ask about the reality of the reserve currency and how it may affect our future.
Well, Bill, thank you so much. Brian, it's a thrill to be here with you. A real honor and a pleasure. And thank you for those kind words, Bill. In fact, actually, if I could tell the story how Bill and I got working together, I'd hired the campaign manager of the year, who will remain nameless, and the campaign manager of the year said, "Joe, if you're going to run for Congress, you got to go negative." I said, "No, I'm not going negative. The strength of our democracy is the competition of ideas." And I told Bill then, we're bankrupt, mega bankrupt. And at the end of it, and we'll talk more about that in a second. And the person, the campaign, we left amicably, and Bill took over as our campaign manager. But he said to me, he said, "Look, if you don't run negative and you run on Simpson Bowles, which was the fiscal responsibility program at the time, says you're going to lose 60-40. And Bill, as you remember, he was wrong. We lost 65-35.
It was a rough year. It was a rough year. But you know what? I so respected that. And I took a photo of you doing the concession call to Nita Lowy, who was New York 16. And it's just such a mensch you were. You know what I mean? You just didn't want to do it. And she never really appreciated it. But we had plenty of stuff to attack her on. Like we had a lot of stuff. And I respect you to death for not doing that.
Well, it's very
Victory
kind
isn't worth everything.
So in terms of the reserve currency, the principle, well, first of all, if we lose the reserve currency, effectively, by definition, right, the value of our currency is going to drop dramatically. She'll drop 30%, let's say.
Can you explain what it is first, Joe? Just the reserve currency,
Sure,
for people who know nothing about it.
So basically, given the strength of the U.S. economy coming out of World War II and the growth of U.S. business institutions across the globe, basically to do business across the world, people use the dollar. So if you want to buy and sell oil, you want to buy and sell any kind of commodity using dollars, and you price those in dollars. So basically, 70 to 80%, 90% of the commodities across the world, well, not the commodities, of the goods and services across the world are priced in dollars. And so because of the strength of the economy. And so that's a big benefit to the US because when you borrow money, right? So if we can borrow as much money as we want today, because in order to pay people back, we can just print it, print the printing press. So ultimately, we can borrow as much money as we want, and that's unfortunately what we've been doing for a long time. Which was the reason I said in 2012 were bankrupt, and even far worse today.
Hmm.
But the bottom line, in fact, even the best way to describe it, I was in Argentina and I had a $1 bill. And my Argentine friend said, listen, if you want to buy a house in Argentina, you got to go with these pieces of paper with a picture of George Washington on the cover.
Hmm.
Because the belief in the US government was much stronger than anything the Argentine at those times. And I will tell you right now, Argentina is going the way of the US with Malay, and the United States is going the way of Argentina. It's a huge risk. We're in great peril. So, because we're basically forfeiting this vote of confidence in the US currency. So, for 30, 40, 50 years, now there's some downsides, which we can talk about, but for 30, 40, 50 years, our currency's been overvalued with all the benefits and detractions. In terms of being overvalued, everything we buy is cheaper.
Hmm.
We're relative to the rest of the world, we're more economically stronger. We can buy much more goods and services because we have a dollar that's highly valued. The big downside has been that we haven't had a trade surplus in 70 years. So
Yes.
Trump, I think, I don't know if he's doing it on purpose or not, but he's progressively encouraging the dollar to fall weaker with lower interest rates, and that makes every U.S. producer stronger, right? Because you're competing with a weaker dollar, and so at the end of the day, but to lose the reserve currency, it would basically we'd be 30% less wealthy than we are today. Then there'd be real implications in terms of interest rates and our capacity to pay our debt. Now, the real challenge is how does this occur? If it happens rapidly, which is probably going to happen, then you could be in a huge financial crisis, a huge financial crisis. Why is that? Because ultimately, you'd be like Greece, what was it, 10, 15 years ago?
Oh
You'd
yeah,
be,
yeah, yeah. I remember that.
Spain,
Yeah.
Spain and Greece. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so ultimately, exactly. So we would be just like that. So you wouldn't be able to pay your debts, because the thing is, oh, we could print more money.
But
The
it's
only
not the
problem
reserve.
is when you print more money, you create inflation.
Yeah.
And then now I mean, we're not going to, well, we wouldn't get there initially, but you're talking Weimar Republic. So, because you're printing more and more pieces of paper, there's nothing tangible other than the good faith of the U.S. federal government supporting the currency. And,
And
and,
Joe,
and
Joe, can you explain for a second, just because you brought it up, and
Yep.
listeners may not be familiar or viewers, can you explain what happened with the Weimar Republic?
Oh, yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, it was about 100 years ago, I think, 1924, more or
Yep.
less.
Yep.
Germany, after the end of World War One, they lost control of their currency. They printed more and more. So you had like 4,000% inflation. That means, in fact, I was in Argentina when they had inflation, hyperinflation. And I went to a business meeting with three of my colleagues. And the first one, a very important meeting, the first guy left. And I said, second guy left. The third guy says, look, Joe, I got to go. I said, why is that? They were getting paid in local currency. They had to
Yep.
go convert it to dollars immediately, or they would have lost the value of their money.
Oh
So
my
the
gosh.
Republic, 4,000, you go into a gym I would go to try and enlist in a gym. If you go in the morning, it's 1,000 pesos. In the
Yep.
afternoon, it's 2,000 pesos.
Yeah. In Germany in those years, the workers insisted on being paid twice a day so they could go and
100%.
buy stuff. Yeah.
Is
They had
that right?
Well, look,
wheelbarrows of cash for a loaf of bread. Yeah. That's what happens.
if we were to get to, look, there's a risk we get in a horrific situation where we are simply printing money. That will lead to hyperinflation, undermine all of everyone's wealth in the nation. We get, I think the reserve currency, the best way to understand it is the same kind of economic crisis that hit Greece. Now, you can come out of it because now you have a much weaker currency. So just think of the currency as the price of goods.
Yeah.
We've overpriced our goods by 20, 30% for the last 50 years because of the currency. That's the downside, right? So now you're gonna reprice your goods at 30% lower price. You can sell more and more and more. So every manufacturer, every business in the United States becomes more competitive. So over time, right, I think you can come back, but you need to understand you're gonna have an economic shock that, look, you have a 10, 15, 20% drop in GDP, 10, 15, 20% drop in
Oof.
economic value. And by the way, the other thing is what's really interesting today, Bill, is the debt levels. And we talked about this in 2012.
When the
Ulti-
debt was 14 or 17, I forgot the number. The debt was less than
Oh,
half than it is now.
yeah,
Yes,
$17
100%.
trillion
Well,
dollars.
again,
14.
and remember, we'll talk about this in future shows, but everybody quotes 36, 38, 40 trillion for the US debt. Then the real number is 120 trillion.
Yep.
And the real reason because the US federal government subscribes to bogus accounting. But what's interesting, the New York Times had an interesting article. Those senators that get elected this year will be there for 6 years. Social Security and Medicare go bankrupt in 2033. So they're going to have to deal with it in the next term. They've kicked this can down the road.
Yeah.
Those funds will be depleted. Anybody think you're going to, so there'll be a 23% drop in the Social Security money that you get. Those funds will be depleted, run bare by 2033. So the time to act, the longer they wait to act, the worse off we are. So and the best way to understand the debt challenge, which could lead to undermining of the reserve currency, is just think of someone who's overweight. If you're overweight, we're wandering around as we're 600 pounds. Now you can make it, you can survive, but you're hugely vulnerable with this debt load that we have, enormously vulnerable. So if we want to be the great power of the world, no way that happens. We can't respond the way we need. And so we're hugely indebted. We're 600 pound waiting, very vulnerable. Can we make it? Sure. We can go on a diet, right? And the only way to really, so this is where the Elon Musk and them are coming in, and the whole technology we'll talk about in a second. You can grow your way at it if all of a sudden you have 5-10% GDP growth.
Yeah.
Now that's a big wish, and I'm not confident. I would like to see us be far more prudent in our fiscal spend.
Joe, that was always the Republican talking point. We'll grow ourselves out of this, but it just didn't happen. Yeah.
No.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupted.
So at the end of the day, to lose reserve currency, the real critical question is how you lose it. I mean, if it happened progressively over time, and it was orchestrated across the globe, it wouldn't have to have a hugely negative impact. But it's highly unlikely that it would happen in that way. In fact, do you know the BRICS countries are already trying to undermine the U.S. currency?
Yes.
And it is a political.
And explain what the BRICS countries are real quick, Joe.
Yeah.
Sure. So the BRICS countries are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And I was on Wall Street when the gentleman from Goldman Sachs wrote the report, and it was fascinating. So in the year 2000, he projected the economic growth of China, India, Russia, Brazil out to 2050. And at the time they were, nobody even paid attention because they're underdeveloped countries, less developed countries. He projected by 2050 they'd be in the top 6 economies in the world. And so the BRICS countries have now banded together, and what they're doing is they all understand the U.S. is problematic at best, and so they want to try and create a new currency. Now, the challenge they have is all of them are in bad shape as the United States, so it's not
exactly.
So it's
Joe,
everybody. We're in a world where
Russians,
everybody takes 100 pounds.
Joe, the Russians and the Chinese with the oil, they're paying in yuan or they're paying in rubles. Like they started to break away, obviously, from the reserve already.
I think I think that there's some movement amongst the BRIC countries, but again, it hasn't gained traction. It's a tough. China's just as indebted as the United States. India and Russia aren't as indebted.
Russia's got no economy. Yeah, Russia has no economy.
And the economy is much smaller. So ultimately, the thing that's saving the dollar now is the fact that we're still the strongest. If we're 600 pounds, the rest of them are 600 pounds and much weaker. And I think, but the real risk is why take this risk? We're putting our kids. So I'm going to dedicate my show to my granddaughter, Bobby Grace. I just became a granddad.
Congratulations!
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 Thank you. I'm visiting my granddaughter here in Austin, Texas.
Oh,
so 3 weeks old tomorrow. We're putting her life at risk. And by the way, the other thing with the debt problem is it's a huge wealth transfer from the youth of America to the wealthy.
the old people. Yeah,
To
totally.
the old people. 6 or 7 out of $10 in the federal government goes to the wealthy. To the older, over 65. And so there's this, you remember, Doug, Bill, we talked about this during the election with
A lot.
Larry Kotlikoff and the clash of generations. So this has been going on forever. It's really amazing to me that, and you know who's Scott Galloway, right? Is all over this. He's talking about how, again, this whole payment, and we should try to get him on the show if we can, how this
Yeah.
whole payment from the young to the old and particularly males in his view are getting crushed.
Yeah. Joe, for your granddaughter, she wants to get a mortgage in 30 years. How will the debt and possibly the reserve currency, losing the reserve currency, affect her ability to borrow?
Well, okay. If we lose the reserve, okay, if we lose the reserve currency in a way that one would expect, precipitous rather than a slow change, we would have huge economic chaos and drop in economic activity and 30% reduction in US wealth and significant drop in GDP. But that would all play out in 5, 6, 7, 8 years, 10
Right.
years.
Yeah.
So if we became prudent after that, then that's what's
But would
being.
she, but would she be competing with the debt payments?
No, well, not well. Again, you're talking 30 years out.
Yeah, 30
So
years out.
30
Yeah.
years out, again, these crises, this crisis, if it hits, will have a horrific impact for 3, 5 years
Yeah.
and take another 10 years to work out. But I think you again, Bill, just imagine you're selling your product with 30% less price.
Yeah. No, totally.
Hmm.
Yeah. Joe,
Every
what happened?
producer in America becomes more competitive.
And forgive me, I don't know just because I'm not an
Right?
economic expert, but I assume that the the British pound sterling was the reserve currency before the dollar,
Correct.
correct?
Yes, yes,
Correct.
yes.
What was the effect in England? Do you know?
Well, same
I
thing.
didn't.
They progressively were impoverished, but again, it didn't. So in other words, I haven't studied it in detail, and I can take a look at it for our next call. But in the brief reading I was doing today, it had initial negative impact but over time they could recuperate, right? I mean, the British pound still is more valuable than the U.S. dollar.
Yeah, and they
It
were
went
also a
from like
socialist
eight to
economy
one, eight to
post-war.
one to
Yeah.
2 to 1. So they had
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
dramatic drop in wealth. And then look, and by the way, if you're talking 30 years out, that if we're gonna segue to my Hinge of History conversation,
We are.
okay, well then
Your
30 years out,
perspicacious, Carvin.
30 years out, well, there's not going to be any money.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, right. Right. I
There's
mean, there's
no
not going to be
money,
money next
Billy.
year. Right.
Elon's telling us. So this is what I love. Look, I'm telling you, this is what my show is, the Hinge of History.
That's what I was going to ask. Tell us about your show. Go ahead. You're going to
Okay.
Well,
anyway.
hold on. Before we go there,
Yep.
just two things.
Yep.
I do want to ask you if you don't mind, Joe,
Please.
just a couple of questions to
Please.
that, and then if it's okay, I want to play for the audience your
Yep.
promo,
Great.
and then we're going to segue straight into the Hinge of History.
Fantastic.
But
Excellent.
when you two guys were talking, maybe people in the audience were thinking of this too, but I'm sitting here going, "Whoa." Okay, so two questions. First question. What would you look for? What will be the signs if we're quickly watching us losing the reserve currency? What would somebody like me, that's an economic illiterate person, see and say, okay, we're about to lose the reserve currency. The dollar's going to collapse. What would be a sign of that?
Well, Hemingway had a great line in one of his books about this. How did you go bankrupt? First, very slowly, and then all at once.
Then all at once. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Exactly.
so ultimately, but I watch for like again. So I know I've lost money in the stock market because I'm terribly concerned. And so when Trump did the whole Greenland conversation last week, the market tanked. I said, "This is game over."
Yep.
Right. So you imagine yourself vulnerable and you trip and fall. So I'd watch for trips and falls. The Greenland, right? We're in a hugely risky world. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists just went from 89 seconds to 85 seconds
Yeah.
the other day, right? But the bottom line is, so I would watch for, the hiccups like Greenland, which lead to a run on the U.S. currency, right? And U.S. debt. I was talking to some great business people. There's huge uncertainty because no one knows which way's up. And so at the end of the day, I'm hoping that Besson can consolidate around his 3-3-3, 3% GDP growth, 3% deficit. I can't remember what the third one is. But the bottom line, and I think the interesting thing about stock market investors today, the Trump economy could boom this year. So I would watch for precipitous drops in the stock market based on stupid comments and knowing we're vulnerable. And on the other hand, or obviously trade deficit, those kinds of things. I'd watch the value of the dollar as well. But the principal thing, I'd watch the stock precipitous drops in the stock market, triggered by comments like we had last week.
Yeah.
So I've got the second question for you.
Yep.
What can the average person do to prepare for a potential loss of the reserve currency?
All right. So again, you want hard assets, gold, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say gold, right?
Gold is the obvious one. Real estate. I'd buy real estate. Farmland is the best. I used to run a farmland fund. Farm is the best asset to own. Why? Because it's gold with a coupon. Obviously, gold, you have no coupon.
Right.
Farmland. So if you look at it, farmland. So basically, the productivity of farms across the globe increases 3% a year. So when you buy a farm, you're buying a factory that's more and more productive. So the value goes up and up over time.
And people have to eat.
And people have to
Right.
eat.
You just need enough money to buy the farm. That's the problem.
Yes. Well, there are other funds you can put into as well, where you
Yeah.
can buy a portion.
Oh, interesting.
And then the other thing is, eventually the U.S. bonds. I mean, right now, all my money is pretty much in bonds. Now, again, those will, if the thing really gets bad, the bonds will, not do well either. But I don't know how much gold I can buy.
Right.
You're looking for
at $5,600 or $800 an ounce or
Right.
whatever it is.
Right.
Okay. I'd love to segue from here into the Hinge of History. I want to pause for just a second. I'd love for everybody to watch the promo, which Joe had a huge hand in helping to carve and put together in his vision. So let's just take one quick pause and let's take a look at this. This is awesome.
A Noble Media Group member.
The world is very different now, for man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life.
6,000 years ago, man invented the wheel. 5,000 years later, he invented the printing press. 460 years later, he would fly. 70 years later, he would step on the moon. And 8 years later, he would send a spacecraft beyond our solar system. Today, we have computers which can think for themselves and robots that can dance. Properly utilized, today's technologies can bring an end to poverty, hunger, and even the need to work, or to make bombs that will end all life on Earth. Will we destroy ourselves or come together? Because it's 89 seconds to midnight, and mankind's future hangs in the balance. Join Joe Carvin as he explores these questions, because mankind is on the hinge of history. So everybody, you've got a chance to look at the promo. Joe, tell us about your vision. Tell us about where you see this going. Explain where we're at right now in the Hinge of History.
Okay. We're living at what the Oxford philosophers call the hinge of history. Sir Martin Rees, you talked about favorite people in the world. Sir Martin Rees is a great hero of mine. He's the former president of the Royal Society of Science in England. The great thing about England, you don't get the mail, you get the royal mail. So he's the
Right.
former president of the Royal Society of Science, right?
And the orb.
And that's an institution he shared alongside Isaac Newton, was a previous president of the Royal Society of Science. He's also Britain's astronomer royal. And this gentleman wrote a book that's an invaluable gift to humanity in 2003. He called it Our Final Century. And he basically said that humanity's chance of reaching the year 2100 were 50-50. Now, he didn't stop there. Which I love, he created the Center for the Study of Existential Humanity at Cambridge University, okay? And ultimately, by the time he created that university and the time he wrote the book, there were more academic studies on snowboarding than existential. Nobody wants to look at it. Nobody wants to look at that. But what he also said in that book, we're living through the most momentous time in the history of the universe since the Big Bang.
Wow.
The Oxford philosophers talk about the history. Now, why is that? Why is that? Okay. we'll start on the positive side. Bill just talked about my granddaughter in 30 years. 30 years, Billy, there's no money. If
No
Elon
correcting.
Musk is correct,
Yeah.
for me, I saw my whole worldview changed when Elon Musk was interviewed by the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Rishi Sunak, in November 2023. And Prime Minister Sunak said, listen, Elon, I'm terrified that AI is going to take away people's jobs. And Elon thought for a second. He said, well, it's hard to predict exactly when this is going to happen. But in the not too distant future, there'll be no need to work. You can only work if you want to work. He says, we're not going to have universal basic income. We're going to have a post-scarcity world of universal high income where people will get whatever they want.
Guaranteed
Now,
minimum
of course,
income
I told
thing,
my wife, she said, you're nuts. What are you talking about? She doesn't really talk like that. Sorry.
We'll kill each other. If we don't have to work, we'll go nuts. We're defective beings.
Bill, that presents a whole new set of challenges.
Yeah.
If there was no need to work, which Elon's predicting for 10 to 20 years, Demis Hassab is probably the top AI guy in the world at DeepMind and Google. He's talking about radical abundance. Demis Hassabis was on 60 Minutes and said, we're going to bring an end to disease. Disease. This is all there. I truly believe that all of this is technologically feasible because the technology revolution is happening faster than anybody understands. What do I mean by that? So Moore's law was the idea that computing capacity doubles every 2 years. Bill and I talked about that in the 2012 campaign. That's a 32-fold increase in a decade. Okay, great. Now, the CEO of Intel, Gordon Moore, was the co-founder of Intel. The CEO in 2015, he said if a Volkswagen car had been transformed in the same way as compute capacity had been, it would go 300,000 miles an hour, get 2 million miles to the gallon, and cost 4 cents.
Whoa.
Would you like to buy a car? And that's where this world of abundance is coming from. That's where this world. So now, but okay, I just told you that Moore's law, 32-fold increase in 10 years because it doubled every 2 years. But now AI compute's doubling every 6 months.
Yeah.
If you take that out, that's a 1 million-fold increase in AI compute. We're not ready for it.
Yeah.
But if we learn how to use that AI compute for the good of humanity, the dramatic advances in technology for the good of humanity, we can bring an end to poverty, we can bring an end to hunger, we can bring an end to disease, and we can bring an end to the need of work. So I wrote a book called The Great Transition to Sustainable Superabundance.
Let's put that. We'll put that up there too, so everybody can see that. And we'll make sure everybody the Great
Wonderful.
Transition.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes, it's an online book. Have at it, and you'll hear from me. But basically, you're going to hear from all the futurists. You're going to hear direct from them. It's an online book with videos embedded. I highly recommend it. And our conclusion is very straightforward. This world of abundance, which seemingly seems crazy, is definitely technologically feasible. In fact, again, we'll post some. We're going to post some videos, more recent as well. So Elon was interviewed by Peter Diamandis, really the godfather of this idea of abundance, the other day, about a week ago. And what was fascinating to me is Elon said it's not increasing a millionfold. He says it's increasing 10 times a year. Well, again, understanding exponentials 10 times a year is a 10 billion-fold increase. But the best thing he said, and Bill, maybe we won't change the name of the program just yet. Exponential wow.
Exponential wow.
Exponential wow.
Exponential wow.
That's
So
what he said.
Elon said, I don't have courtside seats. I'm on the court. And at least once or twice a week, I'm incredulous. Wow at what's happening. So if Elon Musk is saying that just 2 weeks ago, and what's happened since November, all of this has come into view. And it's all feasible. Now, but why we're not on a hinge yet. Now we're loving life. The hinge is the risk. Because these are tools. And the fundamental question is how is humanity going to use these tools? And these tools were launched on a hugely divided world with $1 trillion companies competing for the big prize, right?
Right.
And so across the globe. So ultimately, how do we use these technologies? And so the consensus in the AI space is there's an 85% chance of the superabundance I'm talking about. but there's a 15 to 20% chance the AI decides to get rid of us. And we'll talk more about the risks and all that. Well, wait a second. Bill, when was the last time you played Russian roulette?
I try not to. The deer hunter,
One out of
deer
six.
hunter
One out of
persuaded
six.
me.
I know,
Yeah.
but just to finish. So
Wow.
Oppenheimer and Einstein created a group called the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. And they created a doomsday clock in 1947 to help humanity understand how close we are to self-extinction.
And that was that, by the way, Joe, that was actually in the promo that the folks just watched. That's exactly what Joe's talking about right now. Go ahead, Joe.
100% in the promo, Brian. Thanks for reminding me. But to understand how fast the world's changing. So when they originally set the clock, it was 7 minutes to midnight. Midnight is game over. With the fall of the Berlin Wall, Bill, and you guys should talk about this on the political side of things. The fall
Went the
of
other way. Yep.
The fall of the Berlin Wall, it went to 17 minutes to midnight. Remember the peace dividend we used to have, Bill? The peace dividend? So the safest time ever. Since 1991, we've gone downhill. So in 2020, things have gone so far downhill, they stopped measuring in minutes and they moved to seconds. So they 100 seconds, 90 seconds last year, 2024, they went to 2025, they went to 89 seconds. And our promo has 89 seconds. But Brian and Bill, you tell me what we're going to do with the promo. On Tuesday, they just moved it to 85 seconds.
Yep.
85 seconds. Now, what's really interesting about this is there's a theory that should scare the bejesus out of everybody, and it's called the Great Filter Theory. And what is the Great Filter Theory? That's the idea. So Enrique Fermi, it's all based on the Fermi paradox. Enrique Fermi, and this came back to lunch one day, and he said, you know what? Where's everybody? The universe has been around for 13.8 billion years. It should be teeming with life. And we haven't come across anybody. And so at the end of the day, he says, where's everybody? So they came up with this hypothesis. There must be some filter out there, a great filter that prevents civilizations from attaining a capacity to become multiplanetary species. And part of that thesis is, as technology advances, rather than use it for the good, they use it to destroy ourselves. And that's the number one challenge today.
Right, it's human nature. Human nature is still the number one challenge today, as it's always been. It's always been.
And that's why but it's human nature, Bill, but it's more than that. It's mindset. Our goal, I have an educational enrichment program called One World Future Ready. Our goal at One World is to bring students and educators from across the world to learn with and from each other. Now, we have a program in China. Bill, when I go onto that campus, we've worked with this school, Jiling Primary School, for 10 years now. Spectacular school, spectacular teachers. If you go, Bill, and you look and you take a photo of the campus, and carved into the bushes there is the word love in English.
In English.
How many high schools in America or schools in America have it? The school bushes say
Mandarin,
Chinese. Second, or Mandarin. Second. They encourage their teachers to teach with a loving heart. Now, we do conference calls with them all the time. So I believe in humanity. I believe if we have a different mindset, we can come together, beat the Great Filter Theory, bring us back from the precipice of self-extinction, and create this world of abundance. And I'm going to do that to my last death, dying death on this planet.
I love it.
And that's your show, right? That's going to be your show.
That's my show.
Absolutely love it.
You know,
Brian, I want to say one thing
about
Joe. Just one thing. Joe, just going back to when he was a candidate, was the only candidate I've ever had where I walked in just before TV appearances at New York One, which is the 24-hour political station in New York, where I walk into the green room. Joe was in there on the floor, cross-legged, meditating. I was like, I love this guy.
Oh, wow.
He was doing an interview in Spanish. He speaks several languages, and you were doing it in Spanish, remember? And you went down, and I was like, this is new. I love it. I love this guy.
I've gotten the opportunity to chat and considerably with Joe, and both the promo and talking him into and twisting his arm to doing the Hinge of History. And thank goodness, this is Hinge of History is an apolitical show, folks.
Yeah.
Okay. So
100%.
There's no politics about this. This is just about humanity worldwide. And he's the smartest person I have ever met or talked to in my life. How many languages do you speak, Joe?
Well. I'm gonna. I'm the smart. I'm not gonna reject. I'll tell you how many languages, and well traveled, and that kind of thing. But not smartest. I got to say, of course, my brother's a genius, and Bill, we could talk more about him later. But
Yep.
but in terms of languages, yes, I've had the good fortune to live on 5 continents and learn 4 languages along the way. And you know what? I spent, and I'm going to be.
Plus
I will
plus
toot my own
English.
horn. I'll toot my own horn for 1 second here. I was invited to speak at an education conference in China this year. And I went there for 36 days to begin to learn how to speak Chinese. There's no more important relationship it's a partisan relationship between China and the United States. So again, I want to do everything in my power to bring China and the United States together. In fact, the idea for my education enrichment program, One World, was launched at the Kennedy School in Harvard. I was sitting in a leadership class. I just spent all my money. Everybody said, don't go there. I spent $50,000. Okay, Shag, what are you going to do now? And I'm starting to think about what I'm going to do with my life goal and my life purpose. And I noticed the human being to my right's from Germany. And the human being to my left is from Japan. And we're colleagues and friends. And I said, wait a second. 60 years ago, my life goal would have been to murder each of these human beings because of World War II.
Yep.
Why is it we've created an environment where I've got to murder these people? And today we're friends and colleagues. And I said, if I ever get a chance to create a world where this collegiality exists rather than the war. And so, Bill, you're right. The human way of being is
Condition.
problematic.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty confident we bring Bobby Grace up the right way.
Good.
She'll be a one-worlder.
And I know you will. And Joe, you just One World is how many countries are you in now?
Well, we're 12 countries right now.
You're 12. Oh, last I knew was 10, so you're 12 now. It's just an amazing organization if anyone wants to look at it.
Thank
Oh
you
my
so
gosh.
much.
We are blessed to have you on. I got to tell you, Joe. And again, the Hinge of History, we should be launching in about a week and a half. You're going to get, is it programming twice a week? Is that right, Joe?
I
Is
think
that what we're
two
gonna
or
do?
three. We got to find out 2 or 3 times a week.
It's just going to be amazing. He's going to have amazing guests on. This is not political. This is a show to sit down and learn something and hopefully have more faith cautiously in mankind. And I look forward to it. We're blessed to have you on.
And I've seen Joe has done podcasts before, and his guests are absolutely top notch. They're the expert
cannot wait
in the field. I mean, it really. I won't even drop names of who was on the last call, but it was a pretty good one.
I cannot wait. Joe, thank you so much for
Thank you
joining
so
us
much.
tonight.
Look, again, I want to thank you for doing this. I want to thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. And by the way, I think it's exactly these kinds of respectful conversations that are so needed in our nation today.
Yes.
And
our
so
world.
I can't thank you enough. I can't thank you.
That's why we're doing it.
In fact, actually, we started this just to be clear, because I love your theme and your mantra. Interesting people talking about interesting things in a respectful way.
In an honest and respectful way.
An honest, respectful way.
Honestly.
Yeah. Yep.
Joe, thank you so much. This is
Thanks, guys.
I can't wait. I'm looking so forward to this. I have to tell you.
Me too.
Thank you everybody for following us tonight. Make sure please subscribe to our channel. It does not cost you a penny. Go to YouTube. It's at No Bull Media Group. As you see it right there, at No Bull Media Group. You'll watch this program. You'll watch our quick news. You'll watch Joe's program, which is going to be launching in a week and a half. And we've got other programs that are about to launch, which we haven't told you about yet. So lots of good stuff happening. It's free and you'll enjoy it. And please follow us. And push the like button. And if you've got comments, one of the things, we started off this show answering a comment from a guest. If you've got questions, political questions, drop it. We'll talk about it. We'll put it on the show. Thank you, everybody, again for joining us for the evening, and we will see you again tomorrow.
Good night, everyone.
The No Bull Political Arena is on all major social media platforms. Make sure to give us and your host a follow.
Hey everybody, this is Sophia Nelson. Follow me at I am Sophia Nelson on every one of my social media platforms.
I'm Bill O'Reilly, and you can reach me at Twitter at WFBOR.
Hey, this is TJ. Follow me on X or Twitter at TJ McCormack.
This is Brian Mistro, and you can follow me on X at Brian_Mistro or follow along on Facebook at Brian.Mistro.
A Noble Media Group member.